Okay, well, we get going.
Yeah.
Right, just to advise everybody, this meeting is recorded because there are people who have signed up for this but are not able to watch live, so we will be making the recording available, which you may find useful yourselves. Before we get started, and I'll begin by introducing the team, could I just ask everybody to make sure that your microphone is muted? Because even though you think you're talking quietly to a member of the family or the dog, you actually can be quite loud when everybody else hears it. So please mute your phone or your microphone, please. There will be plenty of opportunity in the session to ask questions directly of. Also, just could I explain the background of the webinar is to give you some, I suppose, understanding of what our programs in Ireland are like. If you were to come here to take part in research at one of our events, or even if you came to research in the Public Record Office on your own or with a friend. So this presentation today is not really or primarily about answering genealogical queries, although we will be including some content we hope you will find of value to you, but it's more about demonstrating the possibilities and what we offer in terms of a program here in Belfast if you were to come next year or whatever to take part in one of the programs. So that's the principal reason for the presentation today. And just to get started, I just want to bear with me a second while I just get this loaded up. Just get the Ulster Historical Foundation's website loaded here. Just bear with me a
And were you
second.
going to introduce us before you show
I
the
was
website?
indeed, Gillian, but I just want to get this done before we start.
Sorry. Hmm.
Um, sorry, I should have had this preloaded. Um, so just before we get going, I have to load it again. It just closed on me. Um, Before we get started, can I just introduce the team to everybody? Because these are the people you would be meeting and working with in the record office if you were to join one of our programs. So my name is Fintan Mullen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Foundation. Also with me is our colleague, Dr. William Rolston, our Research Director.
Hi, everybody.
Our Research Officer, Gillian Hunt.
Hi, folks.
And our Sales and Marketing Executive, Conleth, who would be dealing with you directly if you were planning your visit. Conleth would look after all the arrangements with you. So that's the team that will be speaking to you today. But one of the points we would like to make is that if you were to come on one of our events, you would be meeting many more members of our team. And before I get started into talking, I just want to give in this part of the presentation just a little background to the Ulster Historical Foundation. But what I wanted to stress, and it's no disrespect to anybody, any other organisation or individual that runs these programs, because of course, many individuals run programs to Ireland. The benefit you're getting from coming to the Ulster Historical Foundation is, of course, that you're having the expertise of the whole team, the collective knowledge of the institution that is the Ulster Historical Foundation, rather than relying on the advice and knowledge of one person. No matter how good that knowledge is, it's always good if you have, other folk that can take another look at what you're trying to do. So that's one of the benefits of coming to one of our programs. Now, this is our website, our homepage. Just to give you a bit of background, the foundation, and you can find a timeline on the foundation's website to give you an idea of our history, but we were established in December 1956 as part of the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. And we opened for business in January 1957. So we're coming up on our 70th anniversary. We opened for business by undertaking family history research for clients living overseas. Why that's important is because the foundation was part of the Record Office for over 30 years, or roughly 30 years, and we were separated in the late 1980s and became a standalone educational non-profit unregistered charity. But we grew up within the boundaries, if you will, of the Record Office. So we were working with archivists. We were taught by archivists, and I mean the generation before us, who learned their tricks and trades from archivists. But they weren't archivists. They were there to mine the archives. That's the skills of the Foundation's research team, rather than curate the records. But they were brought up with a very strong background in understanding the value and use of archival sources, and also with a strong knowledge, which we'll come to talk when we speak more about our programs, our specific presentations we're going to do in this program, I should say, is the very broad and open-minded collection policy that the public record have from its inception in the early 1920s right through, where it was gathering records from wherever it could to try and help not only facilitate those research in Ulster ancestors, the northern province, but also try to help make up the loss of records that were destroyed in the Four Courts fire. Because if you like, the Record Office was starting from ground zero. They had to build up the resources. So they were very active, and that's benefit to you as a researcher, because you may learn about collections in PRONI that are not really often available in what you assume is another public archive. Okay, so we have a strength in being part of PRONI for so many years. We work well with PRONI, and of course our genealogical research programs are primarily at PRONI, but not exclusively so. Prior to coming, though, we would strongly suggest you want to familiarise yourself with some resources. For example, Roots Ireland is one of the most important, with 24 million records on it, or the Ulster Historical Foundation. And I just want to take a brief minute to just show you some sections that you will find of value. For example, if you're getting started, if you go to the Start Searching, rather than starting into our online databases, you could look, for example, at these useful resources. So, for example, a source list for Antrim and Down, the county Antrim, of resources that you could use. This particularly useful to you, a free library of books and materials. So all the content in here is completely free, which gives you context into the Ulster history and Irish history, but also other valuable resources of use to your research. For example, parish maps for the 9 counties of Ulster. So you can see that the civil parishes of Ulster available for free to download, and allows you to use those for your work in tracing your ancestors. So say, for example, you were looking for ancestors in the parish of Skerries. Here we have number 74. You'd maybe mark off, right, I've checked sources that I know exist for there, but let me look at parish 33, 577. So this sort of material is there for free, easy to use, and available from the foundation. So those helpful resources are a useful starting point. Also, if you come over to the Discover section of the website, this section has been created to allow people to go on what you might call a deep dive in specific subjects. Our most recent edition earlier this year was this sense of place. Really important is understanding Irish land divisions, particularly county, barony, parish and townland, and especially the townland, the smallest land unit. And this whole section explores that with you. You get lots of information out of this resource, and also it can take you to other very useful digital resources, such as Place Names NI or the Place Names of Northern Ireland project. Okay. As well, you can, for example, explore more historical areas or periods in time in our history. So, for example, Presbyterianism in Ireland, if your ancestors came in to Ulster from Scotland as a Presbyterian family, the Scots in Ulster, looking at the migration in, migration out, because they not all were Presbyterian, although most of them were. The plantation and aspects and how it affected the different constituent groups, the Irish, the native Irish, the English planters, the Scots planters, or something like Catholics in the penal area. So say you're researching a Catholic ancestor family in 1740. Well, it's probably going to create problems for you because there are less resources available than one might hope, but nonetheless, there may be something. And this website and these Discover areas are very good at pinpointing further reading on other sources. We also have our library, and quite a number of books already in our in our library are available to anybody, and some other books are available to our members only. You can also find out more about our events and courses. So while you maybe are considering an in-person visit to Ireland next year or the year after, you can also undertake other courses. For example, we've just recently started our Irish Genealogical Essentials Winter course, which is an online course, and a number of individuals who have been at our recent events in Ireland, some, for example, in September and October just past, said they started their journey with signing up for the IGE online course because it really helped them prepare for an in-person visit to Ireland. So that's something to think about. I don't go on too long, so I will stop there. And just on the subject of these events and courses, I just want to invite both Gillian and William just to give a sort of overview and outline of a research conference. Now, this year we only had 3 research-only conferences. There was no sightseeing and touring, but next year we are offering a full-on 5-day research program and a longer classic, as we call it, UHF conference, where there is sightseeing and research in the archive. So Gillian, take it away.
Thanks, Fintan. So, as Fintan said, next year we're running a range of different conferences. We're running a 3-day event, which is Research in PRONI, Public Record Office, for 3 days. We're running a week-long research conference, and William's going to speak about our traditional conference, which is week-long, but it's a mix of tours and research. So the research conferences are for people who want to spend their entire time in an archive. And you can either choose the 3-day event, which is all 3 days in the Public Record Office with us, or you can choose the 5-day one, which is predominantly in the Public Record Office, but it does include optional visits to our own research library in Newtownards and, for example, archives like the Presbyterian Historical Society. So those begin, all our conferences actually begin with a get-together the night before the conference starts officially, and that's just a chance to meet staff, meet each other, and have a drink, have some nibbles, and just begin to get to know each other. Then on the first day of the conference, we meet in the Public Record Office and we have a series of talks by Fintan and myself and William, as well as a talk by a member of the Public Record Office staff. And then we get a tour of the building. We visit the search room, we visit the reading room. I'm going to show you photos of those in just a moment. And you begin to familiarize yourself with the archive. What I always find is the first day in a new archive can be quite overwhelming. So this is why we set up this program that the first morning gets us familiar with how PRONI organizes its documents, with PRONI's ordering system. So then when you start your research on the first afternoon, you're ready, feel comfortable with the system, you register, you get your reader's card, and then you're good to go. So then the rest of the conference, you are working alongside our team of researchers, and you're looking at original documents, you're looking at microfilms, you're ordering out documents, you're searching online resources. And then our team of researchers, was Fintan, myself and William, as well as a number of our other research team, will be working with you, coming over, helping you identify relevant documents, helping you order them out, sometimes helping you interpret them, or maybe read a particular word that's difficult to understand. And that's the joy of our conferences, I think, is that you have, as Fintan said, this team of researchers. So you could be working with one for a few hours in the first afternoon. The next morning you could work with somebody else to get you started. And every single researcher has a different way of approaching the research. And so over the course of the conference, you get everybody's expertise, everybody's advice and suggestions. So these are just photos of one of our previous conferences. You can see all our delegates are busy working away, looking at the resources in PRONI. Now, William's now going to talk about our more traditional conference, which is a little bit different.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So Gillian has explained the research-orientated conferences, but the traditional conference that we've been running for, well, since the early 1990s, 35 years or so, involves a combination of research opportunities and research. Now, in many ways, in terms of the research, it's along the same lines. It opens with a get-together. It continues on the opening morning with lectures on different aspects of genealogical research and sources you might find in PRONI. But on each of the days, there is also the option to go on a tour. So you can choose. You can decide, well, today I really want to do research, or you might think to yourself, well, actually, I'd quite like to go on the outing today. And some of the outings that we've lined up for next year include visits to Titanic Belfast. Tells a story of that ill-fated ship that was built in Belfast and sank on its maiden voyage in 1912. It's a visitor attraction that brings in hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. There'll also be an opportunity to visit some of our historic houses. Killylea Castle. It's been owned by the same family for 400 years. Likewise, Barnescourt, the home of the Duke of Abercorn, on the Barnescourt estate that's been in his family for 400 years, and allows you to step back in time and to see something of the lives of those who once played such an important part in shaping Ulster society. And in some cases, it might well be a case that your own ancestors were tenants on, for instance, the Abercorn estate. They were tenant farmers paying rent to the Abercorns. There'll also be a chance to go to the Boyne Valley, Bruna Boyne, with its magnificent prehistoric passage tombs like Knowth and Newgrange. There'll be a chance to go to the ecclesiastical capital of Ireland, Armagh. Chance to go and see the famous walled city of Derry and actually be able to walk along part of the walls, the most intact set of walls on this island. And there'll be a chance to go to the very famous Giant's Causeway, a natural feature jutting out into the North Atlantic from the North Antrim coast. And that includes a drive along one of the most scenic roads in Ireland, the Coast Road, running along County Antrim. So it is an opportunity to see some of our best locations, but also the opportunity to do research as well. So you can choose to do as many or as few of the outings as possible. Maybe you just want to do research. Well, that's possible. Maybe you just want to do the outings. That's also possible. Or you maybe want to do a mixture. It's ideal for those of you who might be traveling with a spouse, say, who is not at all interested in genealogy, but would quite like to see some of Ireland. Or we've had combinations of mother, daughters, two sisters, father, daughter, and so on. So there's an opportunity to both do research and get into the archives and get your fingers grimy on the documents, as well as visit some of our wonderful locations.
Okay, thank you, William. And just to I want to reinforce one point that William made. It's the flexibility of the Classic Conference that is one of the most attractive features to those who have come in the past, and so many people have come, because you can arrive fully set that you're going to spend every day in the archive, and you may have 2 fairly bad days in the archive, and it's really deflated you. And we've found in the past people who have hit a brick wall like that say, you know what, I'm going to take the day off. I'm going to have a day of fun, go out sightseeing, come back refreshed, and then maybe feel I'm going to have another crack at this again. Because also William and other members of the team will be traveling with you, say to Causeway or Derry, and so you'll be able to talk with them about your research as we go anyway. So there's always that learning opportunity where you can say, had a rough day in the record office, I'm taking a break, but I'm going to come back at it again afresh, you know, on Thursday morning or whatever it happens to be. And some people chop and change all the time, and we try to keep flexibility as much to the forefront as we can. The only place where we can't offer complete flexibility, if we are taking you to a visitor attraction where there is a specific number of places, and Bruna Boyne, like Newgrange and Knowth might be an example of that. There we may be limited to, say, 18 places or whatever it happens to be. And so if you haven't signed up first, you may miss that. But if we can allow you to change at the last minute, you can. I remember, I don't know if our friend Tim McCorriston is listening in today, but Tim's from New Jersey. Tim's been about 3, maybe more times, and the last time he was with us, he likes an early walk. And Tim was out rocking around the grounds of the hotel near PRONI, where our bus was for the departure for Dublin. And I said, we were chatting, and he says, I was supposed to go to the record office today, but I'm not sure. And he says, you know what? I'm going to jump on the bus. And he just jumped on the bus last minute and headed off to Dublin for the day trip. That's the flexibility we try to allow you where we can. So that's why the Classic Conference is a really good idea, because if you want to spend every minute in the archive if you can, and as William says, if you don't want to go near an archive, you don't have to set foot in one other than the first morning where we have our get together. So
I'm sorry, Fintan, something else we find is some people sign up to the traditional conference and do some touring, some research, but they actually enjoy the research so much that then the next year or a couple of years time they come back to do the whole research conference. So as well, that's why we offer the different conferences throughout the year, just to accommodate everybody's wishes. Yeah,
and a good point, Gillian. Now we're going to hand back to Gillian, and Gillian's there's going to be 3 shorty sessions here by each of us, just trying to convey to you, if you've never used the Public Record Office before, its value. And one of its main values is the breadth of its collections because of its very active collection policy I said at the start, and also particularly the strength of its privately deposited records, which our speakers will come back to. So this is to encourage you just the possibilities for research in the Record Office, whether you're coming with us or whether you're coming on your own. Okay, Gillian. And Gillian's going to talk about church records.
Thanks, Fintan. So yes, I'm going to focus on church records in this short presentation because the great joy of church records is that in some cases they can date back to the 1700s and even some back to the 1600s. So it doesn't matter if you're researching ancestors who left Ireland, left Ulster from a very early period, or you're researching ancestors who left maybe at the start of the 20th century, church records can still be a really major source for you. Now, for those of you who are maybe just beginning your research into your Irish ancestors, these are just some of the key dates. So from the 1st of January 1864, we had civil registration of all births, marriages and deaths. Non-Catholic marriages had been registered by the state from the 1st of April 1845. So in theory, you should be able to get back to that date within the civil birth, marriage and death certificates for any of your ancestors who their birth and death and if they married. But before that date, then you're reliant on church records to find that evidence of your ancestors' birth or marriage or death. Now, these are there's a wide range of church records that you can find. Not every church will have all of these records. The most commonly found records within a church collection are the baptisms, marriages, and to a slightly lesser extent, burial records. And because these are really name-heavy records, these are the kinds of records that different organisations have been busy transcribing and indexing, and then in more recent years, digitising. Now, I'm going to show you a few websites that will have church records online, which is a good place for you to get started now with your research. But just bear in mind, there's a lot of church records that are not yet online. And that's why we want to highlight PRONI's holdings at this point, because you may have searched online, you're not finding your ancestors' birth, baptismal record, and that may just be because it's not yet online. So there's a wide range of places where you can find church records online. There isn't just one website. It is spread over a number of different websites. So I'm just going to take you through some of these. As Fintan mentioned, this is our website, the Ulster Historical Foundation, and you can access as a member or for a fee the birth and baptism, marriage and death and burial records that we have there. And we have church records for counties Antrim and Down, including Belfast. So there's a range of records that we have, and you can access those through our website, but we also make those church records available onto Roots Ireland. And Fintan mentioned Roots Ireland earlier. It is the website of the Irish Family History Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organisation. It is a subscription-based website. Most of the websites I'm going to highlight to you are free, but this one we want to highlight to you because it's so important. It has over 24 million records on it, and you can subscribe for a day, a month, 6 months or a year. And sometimes what I recommend to people, if they haven't used it before, is subscribe for the day, turn off your phone, close your blinds, just kind of blast it for 24 hours and see what is available. Because if this website has already worked on the church that your family attended, you can find a lot of records very easily. But just be mindful that this is an ongoing project. We have a lot of churches in Ireland, so we don't yet have records from every church from every area in Ireland. It does vary. There are a couple of specific places that don't have any records on this site, and that is the city of Dublin, although there are records for County Dublin, and a little bit of South East County Cork. But all the other counties have at least some coverage. Now, what I always recommend before you subscribe is if you just go to the online sources, do you see just up there in the top, bar? Let me just see if I can... actually, I don't want to cause chaos as I have done. Oops. bear with me. That top line, online sources. So if you click into the particular county you're interested in, it then lists which parishes and which time periods it's already transcribed. So you can see whether the time period, the parish, the county you're interested in, or the religious denomination you're interested in has already been covered. Just in general, it has over 80% of all pre-1900 Catholic baptisms and marriages on the site. So it's really strong for Catholic records. It has over 50 to 60% of Church of Ireland records on the site. And then it has between 10 and 15% of other Protestant denominations. So it does vary depending on the denomination you are researching. What Roots Ireland has also done is, for its Catholic transcriptions, it has linked into the digitized Catholic registers on the National Library site. So the National Library of Ireland, in the mid-20th century, microfilmed Catholic registers up to 1880. And then in recent years, those have been digitized. So if you know a particular parish, you can go into the National Library site and just go to the parish, and you're literally reading the register page by page, entry by entry, which is wonderful. And we always recommend you look at original sources where possible. However, if you don't know the parish, or maybe you don't know the year, this is a long process. So that's why we'd recommend you search first on Roots Ireland. You find the record that's been transcribed, and then you click through to this website to look at the original record. And then the other website is irishgenealogy.ie, and it is run by the Irish government, and it has church records for Dublin City, for counties Carlow, Kerry and Cork. Not every church record yet, predominantly Roman Catholic and Church of Ireland, but we are expecting more church records to go on this site at some point. And that's what I would say about all these websites. They are actively adding records. So these are the sort of websites we'd recommend you revisit every few months if you don't find anything in your first search. So those are the main websites that we recommend in terms of church records. Now, of course, there are other big websites like Ancestry, Find My Past. They didn't used to have a lot of Irish church records online. They're a bit better now, but they're not the main websites that we would go to for Irish church records. It would be those ones that I've just shown you. So if you've explored all those, then the next stage is to visit the website of the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. And it has a great website. It has some online databases, which are just shown in that list just under that photograph of the two women on the computer. It also has loads of information about visiting, opening hours, any days that they might be closed for public holidays, what to bring with you for registration, so that you can become informed before you come to PRONI. PRONI is free to visit. All you need to do to get your reader's card is to have photo ID, either a passport or a state driving license. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. The only thing you might ever have to pay for in PRONI is your lunch in the cafe, or possibly some photocopying. But now that you're allowed to use your camera in the search room and reading room, it's quite rare now to have to pay for photocopying, because you can just snap away at the great majority of records, which is brilliant. But in this case, I want to direct you down to the Your Research button, just there in the bottom right. And when you click into that, it takes you to a whole lot of really useful information, including information leaflets, which are on a range of topics in terms of historical topics, and also on record collections that PRONI holds. So that's a really good introduction. You may want to read those leaflets online before you come. And included in that, in the general information series, is a document that William, our research director, and PRONI put together a few years ago on Latin terminology in Catholic registers, because occasionally you may find that some of the Catholic registers you look at are in Latin, and this document lists the main phrases, and then on the back the main names in Latin and English. So again, just be aware that PRONI's website, it's well worth a deep dive into that. It's all free, and there's a lot of really useful resources on it. Now, the representative church body library, it is based in the outskirts of Dublin, and it is the official archive of the Church of Ireland, the Anglican Church in Ireland. And it is an archive that you can arrange to visit. It holds Church of Ireland registers, particularly for the Republic of Ireland, the south of Ireland. But it does have this Anglican record project where it has begun to digitise and transcribe some of the Church of Ireland registers that they hold there. And they received a grant from the Irish government a few years ago to buy a scanner to digitise more of these records. So over the next few years, we are expecting more Church of Ireland registers to come online through this Anglican record project. So that's just one to kind of keep your eye on. And then there's the Presbyterian Historical Society of Ireland, and that covers the whole Presbyterian churches in the whole island of Ireland. And this is a library, an archive, and a museum. It's in Belfast. And if you come on a week-long research conference, you have the option of visiting this archive with William Rolston. The majority of Presbyterian records are in PRONI, but there are some Presbyterian records that are only available in this archive. And it has a lot of other records. If you have any family who were ministers in the Presbyterian Church or just quite prominent in the Presbyterian Church, this archive is definitely one you'd want to make contact with and maybe arrange to visit when you're in Belfast. And they have a list on their website of those records that are only available in their archive that are not available in PRONI. And then finally, coming back to the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, established in 1923 after partition, opened to the public in 1924, and it's now in this beautiful building in Titanic Quarter in Belfast that was opened in 2011. And this is the foyer of PRONI, and one of the things that we would say about PRONI is it's just a lovely archive to research in. The staff are really friendly, they're really helpful, they really want you to find the records that you're looking for, and they'll go out of their way to do that. And it is just a really pleasant environment. Some archives almost seem like they don't want visitors, I find occasionally, and they can seem quite strict. PRONI isn't like that. Yes, there are rules you have to follow to protect documents, of course, but it is just a very pleasant place to spend a week when you come to Belfast. So again, looking at that PRONI page and going back to your research area, in this case, we're not looking at information leaflets, we're looking at guides to PRONI records, and particularly that top one, the Guide to Church Records. And this is a PDF, it's 374 pages, so you maybe don't want to print it out, but you can download it onto your computer, or you can just access it through the PRONI website and favourite it. And this lists all the church records that PRONI is aware of, either if they're held by the church themselves, or they're held in PRONI, or they're held in the Presbyterian Historical Society. So the guide is organised by civil parish, just alphabetically by civil parish. And what's really good is you might be saying to yourself, I don't know what parish this church is in, but you know the name of the church, maybe from some other record that you have within your family. So PRONI has done a really good job of cross-referencing. If you look at those two Presbyterian churches there on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that actually the guide itself tells you which parish to look at if you know the name of the church. So there's really good cross-referencing. Some churches have more than one name. So again, it will cross-reference for you and direct you to the right page. Within each parish, it is then listed alphabetically by denomination. So you see there, CI is Church of Ireland Anglican, P for Presbyterian, RC for Roman Catholic. You'll have Baptist, Congregational, RSV is for Religious Society of Friends, Quakers, Methodists. Not every parish will have all of those smaller denominations. And then it will describe to you what records are available. It will tell you the time period they have baptisms, marriages, burials. If they have any other kinds of church records, those will be listed as well. And then on the right-hand side, it will give you a reference. If it's a reference, that means it's held in PRONI, or it may direct you, for example, local custody. You'll need to contact the church itself. Presbyterian Historical Society down there in the bottom left, you'll need to contact that organisation. So you're not seeing the actual church records on the PRONI website because these are still private records, but it is giving you one step further to identify what records exist and where they're held. And that's something you can do from home online. Now, just one brief comment. Public Record Office of Northern Ireland is the official archive of Northern Ireland, the 6 counties shown there on the right-hand side: Antrim, Armagh, Derry, Londonderry, Down, Fermanagh and Tyrone. But it also has excellent records for the other 3 counties that make up the historic province of Ulster, Donegal, Monaghan and Cavan. And it actually has other records further south. So, for example, on this page on the left from the Guide to Church Records, it's describing church records that PRONI holds from County Louth, County Leitrim, County Cavan and County Monaghan. Well, all 4 of those counties are in what's now the Republic of Ireland, but yet there are still records, church records for some of the churches in those parishes in PRONI in Belfast. So that is something to bear in mind. I would say if you're coming to PRONI, it is better to have at least one Ulster ancestor to be researching, one ancestor from the north of Ireland to be researching. But certainly if you maybe have a couple of different Irish ancestors and maybe some are from further south, PRONI might still be helpful for you. It is possible. And then on the right-hand side, just some records from churches in Dublin that PRONI has in. So despite it being the official archive of Northern Ireland, its collections are much wider than that. So the vast majority of church records in PRONI are available on microfilm. So that's like a little reel of that negative microfilm. And some of you may remember using those if you've been doing research for a while. And you look at those in the search room. The search room is where you look through the catalogue, you order out documents, you use the reference library, and you look at the microfilms there for the church records. You can see those microfilm readers there, the wooden ones there on the left. So these are just a couple of examples that I've taken from PRONI documents. This is for Toba Key Presbyterian, and this is baptisms from 1838, 1839 on microfilm there in PRONI. This is Skibbereen Circuit in County Cork, the Methodist Church. There's a lot of Southern Methodist records are available on microfilm in PRONI. And these are baptisms from the 1840s. So you can see a lot of people's time in PRONI, particularly the first few days, might be spent looking at those church records. These are just a few of our conference delegates. And one of the things we do, it's quite hard to see in these photos, is all the conference delegates wear red lanyards. You can just about see this lady wearing a red one there. And then Fiona, one of our researchers, you can just about make out she's wearing a yellow lanyard. And what's really good about that is it helps identify, the research team can immediately see who's a member of our group to offer assistance. And equally, some of our research team may be in a couple of days, but not all week. If you see someone with a yellow lanyard, you know that's part of our team. You can go and ask them for assistance. Now, while I said the vast majority of church records in PRONI are in microfilm, some of them are in paper copy. So you may see, for example, with Cumba Parish there in County Down, a lot of it is available there in microfilm, but you can see there's some extracts, some early extracts are available under a T reference, some under CR, and some Methodist records under D. So D in the PRONI records is an original deposited record. T means it's a typescript or a photocopy. It's not the original, but you're still looking at a paper copy. And CR stands for church record. So again, that's an original document. You would order those documents out, and then you would go over to PRONI's reading room. This is a really secure room where you can handle original documents dating back to, well, back to the 1600s. In the vast majority, the earliest document PRONI has is from the 1200s, and you can order that out, you can examine it, you can take photographs of it, you can read it. Absolutely wonderful space to do that. So this is Inishmacsaint Church of Ireland, and you can see this is a T reference, so it's a typescript of the records from the 1600s. Carnmoney Presbyterian from 1710s. It again is a T reference, but in this case, rather than being typescript, it's a photocopy of the original. So you can see the original handwriting, but it's just a photocopied image. And then Christchurch Church of Ireland Burial Register, and this is CR, so this is the original register that you're getting to order out and read through. And original documents are just always so fun to look at. And of course, the original documents have the potential of it being something that your ancestors signed or filled out themselves, and that's what's really special about them. And again, this is just some of our conference delegates. You can see the red lanyards a bit better in this photo, actually, in the reading room, looking at those original documents. Now, just to finish off, I mentioned the main church records that have lots of names in them, baptisms, marriages, and burials. Those are the ones going online. Those are the things that most people start the research with, because they're going to give you that conclusive proof of who the name of the parents were, or the name of the spouse, or whatever. But there are lots of other church records, lesser known kind of administrative papers, things like vestry minute books, session minute books, confirmation lists, lists of people taking communion. Some clergy actually kept census of their congregation, or even of the whole parish, or maybe even kept notebooks of their parochial visits. And you may find some churches have these other administrative records, and these are really helpful if perhaps the baptisms, marriages, and burials don't survive from as early a period as you would like, or perhaps there's gaps in the records. These other administrative records can fill in the gaps. The main thing about these, and the reason that I'm finishing with it, is they're not generally digitized or transcribed or online anywhere. The odd one you might find, but mostly these are just still in the archives. So if you've looked online and you see that your church, your ancestors' church the registers have been transcribed, but you're still not finding anything, do bear in mind that when you actually come to Ireland, you do have these other kind of church records that you can examine in the archives. Like I say, not every church will have all of these, but a lot of churches will have at least some of them. And that opens up a whole other avenue of research for you. So I'll finish there and pass over to, I'm not sure who's talking next. Is it William? Thank you.
Gillian, thank you very much. William, if you would like to come in now, and William's going to talk to everybody about law and order records at PRONI.
So hope that has filled the screen okay. Yep, good. Thanks, Gillian. So I'm going to spend a little while talking about records relating to the maintenance of law and order that can be found in the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. And it is something of a truism in genealogy that you're more likely to find your ancestors if they did something wrong than if they did something right. And also, what's also very useful about law and order records is that they will include a very broad spectrum of society. So some records will be very much focused on the elite within society. Others will focus on farmers or merchants in towns. But with law and order records, you find a very broad range of people from different walks of life, all of whom could have ended up either on the wrong side of the law themselves, or maybe even as victims of crime. So it's not just about the perpetrators of crime, it could also be the victims of crime. So just very briefly, the court system in Ireland. So in Dublin, there were the 4 superior courts. They were the 4 courts located on the north side of the River Liffey, where the old Public Record Office of Ireland was located, which sadly was destroyed in 1922. But the 4 courts, Chancery, Common Pleas, Exchequer, and King's Bench, or once Victoria came to the throne, Queen's Bench. Sadly, the great majority of records that existed and had been in the Public Record Office in 1922 were destroyed. Now, you can find information from, say, newspapers or some surrogate records, but sadly, so much of the records generated by the court service were destroyed. That also applied, sadly, to the local courts. So the assize courts, which were held in each county, the quarter sessions held in each county 4 times a year, hence quarter sessions, sometimes more often than 4 times, I should say. The petty sessions courts, that I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment, and the manor courts that were organised by estate. And there were other courts, an admiralty court, a bankruptcy court. But sadly, it must be said that most of the records prior to the late 19th century were destroyed in 1922. Now, having got the negative out of the way, let's go on and look at some of the positives. So, manor court records. Now, a number of landed estates, by virtue of receiving a royal patent, were able to host manor courts. And the manor courts dealt with a range of issues on the estate. So, for example, one I was looking at recently concerned two farmers, one of whom claimed that he had agreed to buy a farm from the other and had given him a deposit. They then fell out, and the matter came before the manor court. And it's very interesting because of the level of detail contained in it. So many people were brought in as witnesses. One of the witnesses, or one of those who was named in the manor court record, it specifically said that he was the son of one of the parties and he was now in America. So manor court records, they're maybe not as plentiful as the likes of leases or rentals that you can find of manor court records, but nonetheless, where they do exist, they are extremely useful in the search for your ancestors. So keep an eye out for manor court records. They'll be found with landed estate collections, of which there are many, many in the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. An important function of the grand jury was in hearing cases and deciding if there was a case to answer, you might say, and whether or not the matter should proceed to a full trial. Now, I know the grand jury system operates, at least in some states in the United States. I don't know if it's in every state, but it's the same principle that the grand jury, which was the most important body within local administration, would hear initial cases, decide if there was any merit in a case, and whether or not it should proceed to a trial. And so the grand jury indictment books provide information on cases that were initially heard by the grand jury, and decisions as to whether or not it should proceed to a full trial. In this case, it's a volume for County Tyrone. It begins in 1745. It's in PRONI, but if you look at the edges of the pages, you can see where they're charred. This was a document that was almost destroyed in a fire, not the fire in Dublin in 1922. These records were held locally in County Tyrone, but this document only just escaped being burned up in a fire, but it survived, and it's now in PRONI. And you, if you wanted to look at this, could go along and order it out and peruse the details contained in it. Some of the Crown books recording details of court cases at either the assizes or the quarter sessions prior to the late 19th century do exist in PRONI. So this is just an example of one for County Antrim. It survives from the early to mid 1920s. It identifies those who sat as the justices of the peace at the quarter sessions. It names the jurors, and it gives in very summary form the details of the cases that were brought before it. Who were the perpetrators of the crime, the victims of the crime, what was the crime, and what was the judgment and the sentence handed down. So this is the sort of thing, again, there are not many of these, I would emphasize that, from the earlier part of the 19th century, but from the later part of the 19th century onwards, you'll find many more of these types of records in PRONI. Okay, so petty sessions courts. So the major courts were the assizes and then the quarter sessions. Lesser crimes were tried or heard at the petty sessions courts. And from the 1820s onwards, a network of petty sessions courts was created across Ireland. For counties in what's now the Republic of Ireland, the records are in the National Archives in Dublin and can be accessed through the Find My Past website. For the 6 counties of Northern Ireland, the surviving records are in PRONI. And some of these records do actually go back as far as the 1820s. And you can find some really fascinating information in them about your forebears. I mean, just recently we had one of our conferences And two of our delegates were able to find out some really very interesting and illuminating information about their ancestors through a review of the Petty Sessions court books. So the records that survive for Northern Ireland are in PRONI. They're listed under, catalogued under HA, that's the prefixed, that stands for Home Affairs, the Ministry of Home Affairs in the old Northern Ireland government. And again, Fintan has mentioned it already, that the depth of the cataloguing in PRONI means that you can burrow down through the e-catalogue to find out exactly what is available. Now, you'll notice even just from that initial listing that some of the records maybe don't go back very far at all. I mean, for example, records for Ballycastle begin in 1950. However, records for Antrim Petty Sessions Court go back to 1840, Armagh 1855, Ballyclare 1851, Ballamy 1851. So some records do go back even into the 1820s. Now, what do these books look like? Well, this is one for the Petty Sessions Court at Killylay in County Down. And you can see it's laid out, printed headings, laid out in tabular format. We've got the name, we've got, first of all, the date, we've got the complainant's name and residence, we've got the complaint, we've got the name of the defendant, the witnesses sworn, and then the adjudication. So the second one down of those is from 1831. The complainant is the Reverend Charles Campbell of Killock, a coastal village in County Down. And the complaint he makes against Andrew Harper is for keeping and allowing a yard dog to wander on the public road without a log, contrary to the statute. So he goes on to relate how he had been walking along the road and he was attacked or threatened with being attacked by this large dog that had not had a log tied around its neck to prevent it from pouncing on him. Some of the others on this page, you can see a complaint for not allowing him sufficient diet, for throwing stones into an orchard and knocking apples off the trees, and so on. So some things that we might consider really rather petty, but which nonetheless were brought before the Petty Sessions Court. Now, you also notice that in terms of adjudication, no appearance appears several times as well. So it seems the individuals did not turn up for the court. Here's just another one for Stewartstown in County Tyrone. And again, a mixture of different cases and offences: intoxication, having his cart on the street at night. But here we have one which stands out quite startlingly from the rest: a charge of murder. Of course, this was much too serious a crime to be heard by the Petty Sessions Court, and so it was referred to the assizes, the superior of the county courts, and so it was referred to a trial at the Omagh Assizes. So you can see the way in some cases matters were dealt with locally, and in others they had to be referred to a higher court. Other types of items you can find within Petty Sessions court records include this volume for Brookborough and County Fermanagh. It's a list of fines and penalties. Look at the way it's been annotated. Look at all the scribbles and notes. Quite often they're a note of a receipt of the payment of a fine. And even look at this bundle of documents contained within the volume. So some of these contain really quite remarkable information. And in terms of the depth of information they contain, it can be really very interesting. So here's just one listing fines imposed. And so in December 1852, a James Maguire was fined for fishing with a net not sure if this was out of season or whatever, or maybe he shouldn't have been using a net, but anyway, he was fined £1.10 for fishing with a net. And then there's another note on the same page, I've blown it up. James Maguire fled to America. Warrants returned unexecuted. Now, I wouldn't have thought that being fined for fishing with a net was such a serious crime that you had to flee to America. But nonetheless, there we have a record of when James Maguire crossed the Atlantic. And if you have been researching your ancestry, you'll know how difficult it is to find evidence for their emigration, certainly in terms of people leaving Ireland. Prior to 1890, there are no official records of people leaving the British Isles. There are certainly some passenger lists, and you may well find records of their arrival in North America or in the Southern Hemisphere. But for most people, we simply can only give approximations for when they emigrated from Ireland. But there's a note. We know that James Maguire left for America sometime not long after December 1852. Okay, so records of prisons and prisoners can also be found in PRONI. The earliest records of prisoners tend to be those associated with the assizes. So in other words, people who had been incarcerated awaiting trial. So this is pre-sentencing. So for example, here's a listing of names of Crown prisoners who were standing trial in Omagh, at the assizes in Omagh in 1774. So here we have the first one of those is Dulta Donnelly, charged with being guilty of the feloniously stealing 4 heifers near 5 Mile Town in said county. So he's in custody awaiting trial. Somebody else is there for using false coin. Somebody else is going to be standing trial for breaking into somebody's house, and so on. So records like this can tell us a bit, at least, about those who had been arrested and awaiting trial. In the 19th century, these records are very often printed, or at least there's a printed template, and the information may be added by hand. So this is one, a calendar of prisoners for trial who are being held in the jail of the county of Antrim. And this is from 1832. It's for the summer assizes of 1832. So there we have an alphabetical list of the prisoners. That's actually at the Lent assizes, 1832. So you can see it's mainly printed, but a few extra names have been added by hand. And then if you go to the relevant page, you'll have details of the prisoners, how old they were, when the crime was committed, by whom committed, so who was you might say the magistrate who committed them to jail, and then the offence. So again, a range of different crimes having been committed. And many of the people who were, of course, found guilty of the more serious offences would have been sentenced to transportation to Australia. Transportation was very much part of the Irish penal system, even going back into the 17th century. From then until the outbreak of the American War of Independence, they would have been sent to the American colonies, to North America. But from the 1790s onwards, they were sent to Australia. And that continued right through until the middle part of the 1800s. Now, prisons, jails as for holding convicted prisoners. Records of those can also be found in PRONI. There are records certainly for Belfast, for the prison in Belfast on the Crumlin Road, from the late 19th century onwards. And prison records can actually be exceptionally informative when it comes to telling us about those who were incarcerated. Just before I show you an example of that, It's worth mentioning that PRONI has actually created indexes to some of these prison registers. And in fact, you can even download some of them from the PRONI website. So if you use the PRONI e-catalog, you burrow down into the catalog, anything where it says view, you can download that typically as a PDF from the PRONI website and peruse the record itself. So there's a page from the Register for Female Prisoners held in Belfast. And you can see there's a lot of information has been presented there, but let's just blow up one of those pages. And so you've got the name of the prisoner. You have a description giving age, height in feet and inches, hair color, eye color, complexion, any marks on the person, where the prisoner was born. Now, that can be exceptionally interesting. Sometimes you can see the very first prisoner, Lucy Campbell, was born in England. Others, it simply says Belfast, but very often it will be more specific than that. It can actually get down to parish or town or village. It gives their last residence, so where they had been living just prior to their arrest. It gives their trade or occupation. It gives their religion. It gives the degree of education as well. So from a prison record, you'll find details that you will not find in any other record in many cases. You know, a death certificate will not give you the height of your ancestor or their hair color or their complexion. But a prison record might well do that. And that's not to say that you're going to wish you had an ancestor who went into prison, but there is, of course, that possibility in your family tree. We just no accounting for our ancestors, and we have to accept all that we come across about them. So I'm going to stop there. I will, if I can, let me see, stop sharing and hand back to Fintan.
Thank you very much, William. And I am going to just start sharing my screen now. Can everybody see that okay? Yep. Okay, thanks to William and Gillian for their contributions about the value of the Public Record Office. And I suppose in starting this presentation, this little chunk, is to reinforce the point that while digitisation of records in Ireland, this is remarkable what's been achieved in the last 10 and 15 years. So much is online, but so much far more is offline and it's not digitised. It's like the tip of the iceberg is what you see on online data sets. So many of the collections in the Record Office in Belfast or the National Archives in Dublin are still not digitised. And people who are relatively new to research have a tendency to feel that, well, if it's not on Ancestry, it's not there, it doesn't exist. That's the opposite is the case. And what we're trying to encourage you is to be brave and stick your foot out, neck out, take a trip over here if you feel like you can, feel like you want to, because you may, not everybody wins or makes a breakthrough, but you may be positively surprised. So much of it is not online. That's why coming to the archives can be great fun. You're digging into the records yourselves. PRONI, I will also another point I want to make to you, because people have been asking about cameras and taking photographs in the Q&A or the chat. PRONI is a very accessible archive, and the staff are some of the most helpful you may meet in any archive. First to remember is that once you start ordering documents, you can order documents all day long until the time is up, usually half an hour, 45 minutes before the archive actually closes. So depending on what you're looking at, you can get through quite a substantial body of material all day long. Not all archives are like that. Some archives limit you to a certain number and then that's it. Other archives may limit you to certain cycles. So if you haven't an order in by 11:30 for a deposit to your desk by 1 o'clock, you're not ordering. Some archives close for lunch. And so unless you've got a big chunky document to look at, you're really left twiddling your thumbs. PRONI is the opposite of that. You can take records out all day long as soon as you get in. And the other really important thing, those asking questions, is that you can photograph practically anything in PRONI. That's why it's such a wonderful thing. If you're there, time pressed, but you find a rich seam of records, you can say, right, I don't have the time to look at this now, but I'll snap everything I can and I'll look at it later, or in my hotel or wherever I'm staying, or when I get back home to my place of residence. So, in fact, so good is it that if there is a collection of records that cannot be photographed, for example, that they're in poor quality and so conservation has barely let you look at them, or that the depositor has expressed wish you cannot copy, you will actually be put at a table, a specific table that says you're not allowed to copy this record, but everything else you can copy. So we're talking about a really accessible archive with very big collections. I want to go back to that point again about their very broad and open-minded collection policy that we've alluded to already, and just how valued, because Ramsey, and William will come back to Ramsey in the Q&A about 18th century records, but one of those, of course, are the landed estate records of the great landed estates. And those, come back to the catalogue, in some cases, not all, but in some cases are very expressively catalogued down to a very substantial level of detail. So they can be remarkably easy to navigate, even though you're only there in the archive for the first time. And certainly with William or Andrew, one of our other searchers at your shoulder, you would be able to get to something quite quickly. For example, just looking at here, these are privately deposited records where PRONI excels because of their very active collection policy. We can see under D5 and D6 rent rolls for the Ward estate in Bangor, County Down, including town rents, and that's for 1746 and 1747. Limited document, order that out, photograph it, give it back. You can see how quickly and actively you can work in PRONI if you've got yourself organised, and our team's there to help you. But also if you do prep work, for example, this is the public-facing version of the PRONI electronic catalogue that you could use from home. So plan what you maybe want to do before you get here. And I want to reiterate a couple of points already made, Gillian, as content, and we'll come back to it again and again. PRONI is nominally as the archive for the 6 counties of Northern Ireland, but Gillian has already indicated that they have a lot of material for the 9 counties of Ulster, so they have material for Donegal, Monaghan and Cavan. But when it comes to certain collections, they often have material for parts of the whole, not the whole island, but parts all over the country is what I should say. And landed estate records is a perfect example of that. The reason being that these landed estate owners, depending on whether they're very wealthy or relatively small, they all seem to develop in similar ways, in the sense that their original land grant may have placed them, for the sake of argument, in County Fermanagh or County Antrim. But over time, as they married other landed aristocracy, as they maybe were awarded titles, left land behind or left money behind in wills, they were able to accumulate more property, but not necessarily in the main county where their original land grant was. And over time, they gathered up little parcels all over the island. And PRONI may, in some cases, have records relating to southern counties because that particular landlord acquired that property through whatever transaction it was. And we have an example here for an estate owner in Fermanagh, but he has lands. This is a land and a map here for County Waterford 1802. And the reverse may be the case for the National Library of Ireland, somebody in, say, Kildare owning land in, say, County Londonderry. So it can be really valuable. Now, it's not to pretend that if you've got ancestors that are only from Waterford, you don't have a northern branch at our conferences for you. That would be misleading. It's primarily for those researching Ulster, the 9 county ancestors. But what we want to convey to you is that there is remarkable amount of material you can access in PRONI. There's a lot of advice and expertise that our team can share with you that helps you understand how you might access records, be it in a county like Leitrim or Sligo, which are relatively close to Ulster. So it's worth bearing in mind. And here's just another one example of this miscellaneous range of sources I just want to touch on. And this here is a listing. It's actually sorry, jump forward on me there. Plantation of County Wexford 1618. So this is some years after the Ulster plantation, and it's not a real plantation at all, but oddly it's a document that's in PRONI. Gillian told you T record could be a transcript or a typescript, so it's a copy, as you can see here. The government authorities realised the confiscation and reletting of lands, they suddenly realised this is a very good idea. It generates money for the government's coffers. So they decided to look at other parts of Ireland where individuals who may have been holding land for hundreds of years, 150, 200 years or more, and they thought they were perfectly secure in their land tenure, that the government authority suddenly says, well, actually, you are holding your lands contrary to the law as it stands, and therefore we're going to have to maybe issue you with a fine to bring you into line with legislation. So it was just an old game to generate more money. But it results in a listing of individuals, for this case here in Wexford as early as 1618. You can see it says natives here, over here in the right-hand side as we look at it. And again, it's a document about settlers, sorry, individuals living in County Wexford in the bottom southeast corner of Ireland, but it's held in the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. Another example, talking about landed estate records and their value. Here is the Aldeburgh estate in County Wicklow from 1790. It's a lease book. What's really interesting about this lease book, it can give you so much, both members of our team have mentioned already, just how much individual information some records can have. So you've got the start of the lease, the tenant's name. I'm going to come back to this column here. The names of the lives, so there are three lives leases, denominations referring to the townland, and the acreage that they're leasing, both in English acreage and Irish, and then other information, including observations, which could give information about when somebody left, died, or whatever. But it's in this column here, which is really interesting, because rather than saying whether the individual was a freeholder or not, they used the terms freeholder and papist, because at this point in time, the legislation would change very shortly afterwards. But at this point in time, Catholics were not allowed to vote as freeholders and as 40-shilling freeholders in county elections. And that's why they have been listed as papist in the record. And the freeholder would be Protestant tenants who would, if the value of their holding was sufficient, they would qualify as freeholders and therefore be allowed to vote. But it's interesting from a record like this, because of the sort of the mores and norms of that time, would help you identify if an individual was a Catholic ancestor. Note again, it's in Belfast, but it's for County Wicklow. Here's another example of PRONI's very broad collection policy. We have mortuary records for Virginia City, Nevada in 1881 to 1888. So a typescript of a source in PRONI, but relating to North America. And it concerns individuals from all over North America. But you can see that first entry here relating to 1881, Martha, wife of John Sullivan, native of Australia. So a lot of these people in places like Nevada were in mining. And of course, they're following gold mining. So they've been to places maybe like New Zealand or Australia, California, Klondike, British Columbia, people moving around to follow the same trade that they knew. So an individual born in Australia has died in America, but almost certainly of Irish origin. And some of these records indicate, for example, you can see there Pennsylvania or some other location, but here you can see County Cork, Ireland, and sometimes the location is more specific. So what we're trying to convey is PRONI is really an unbelievable collection and potential mine of information because of this very active collection policy. Here's another example here you could look at for free. You wouldn't even need to go to the archive for this, because it's a typescript copy of copies of the marriage registers for the parish of Portpatrick in Wigtownshire, Scotland, containing entries relative to persons from Ireland. And these are from the 1720 to the 1846 people. A lot of people will know of Gretna Green and the idea of eloping and to get married just across the border from England. But many people in Ireland in the 18th and early 19th century may have eloped and gone to Scotland, for example, Portpatrick, closest port to our ports on the County Down side of the Irish Sea. And these are recorded in documents in Scotland, but PRONI have a holding of them, a collection of them. Now, I don't have very much time. I don't want to go on too long. I just want to touch on a few sources of the type of thing that you would be able to dig deeper into when you're in Belfast if you come on one of our programs. One of the most useful potentially for some individuals for the 19th century are the poor law records, the records relating to the poor law unions and the workhouses. They are under the prefix BG for Board of Guardians, the individuals who manage the affairs of the workhouse and the administration of poor relief in that poor law union. A poor law union was a new geographical division created in the late 1830s, where a market town was chosen and roughly 11 or 12 miles around that radius was designated as the Poor Law Union. Now, they bequeathed us a large number of records, including, of course, records relating to indoor and outdoor relief, people who are destitute who have to get relief. Initially, only indoor relief was provided. You had to become an inmate, as they referred to you. And here's an example of, sorry, this is an example of an outdoor relief register, beg pardon, but an indoor relief register would survive, for example, from the period possibly immediately before the Great Famine or during the Great Famine, maybe after too. Given the scale and the impact of the famine, they had to introduce outdoor relief, where you did not go into the the workhouse as an inmate, you were given relief outside of it. And so many more of us may find our ancestors in a record relating to outdoor relief than indoor relief. And some of us may fall into a swoon at the thought of great-great-granny being in the workhouse. But unfortunately, that is the nature of life in Ireland at this time, especially during the Great Famine and the periods after it, where famine and then harvest failure, poor weather resulted in crop failure, and people needed to really backs to the wall had to go in. But one thing I also want to mention to you, which our team will stress if you're with us, is that you shouldn't shy away from records and say, well, my family were quite well-to-do farmers. They would never be in the Board of Guardian, the workhouse records. Well, there could be all sorts of reasons they may be in there. So as the century progressed, the Poor Law Union and the officers involved became more involved in public health activities. So we can, for example, find within the Board of Guardian records, in this case, Castle Quarter District in Ballymoney, we've got a register of vaccinations. And that's not register of vaccinations of children who were in the workhouse. That is individuals in the neighbourhood who were vaccinated at the local workhouse in the infirmary. And on that point, it's also worth bearing in mind, and you're just seeing this vaccination register, where your ancestor could be a wealthy farmer, but were just inoculated there because that's where they went to get their jag. And the other thing to say about the infirmary, again, people might fall into a swoon if they hear that great-great-granny died in the infirmary. Well, it's possible she was an inmate of the workhouse, but it may be, as in many cases, she just went into the infirmary at the end of her life, because in many locations in Ireland, the infirmary belonging to the workhouse was the only medical facility that was available. And so if you were near the end of your time, you may have gone in, and the last 2 weeks of your life may have been in the infirmary. It does not mean you were ever a inmate of the workhouse. It does mean you simply died there. So you should always explore the possibility of records. Never turn your face away from a potential source. And we will reiterate that again and again when we're with you in PRONI. Now, I want to spend the rest of my time very quickly just touching briefly on another collection of records, school registers. Why? Because while some are being digitized and made available online, a substantial amount of them are still offline, still non-digital archival sources you have to look at in person. The biggest holding for the 26 counties of the Irish Republic are held in the National Archives of Ireland, and they obviously have the biggest collection of the national education records. So the national education system introduced around 1830-31. The Public Record Office holds material for Northern Ireland, and that is all housed in the Public Record Office. Now, in terms of identifying schools, if you don't know where, we will show you some tricks when you're with us in the archives. But things you could look at before getting here is like street directories for Belfast or other big cities. Ordnance Survey memoirs, especially the digitised versions of those, because you will see often either a school marked or the name of the national school marked. Sources like Lewis's Topographical Dictionary, Griffith's Valuation, and as I say, those historic map viewers. Now, very quickly, because people tend to focus on school registers only, those are the records of the pupils in the school, but we will remind you, if you're with us in PRONI during our programme, that there are other records you can use. So under the national education system that was introduced at this time, we have the registers of the pupils. We have grant date applications, especially the ones from the 1830s, early 40s, could be really helpful. Teacher salary books, if you were researching a teacher ancestor, and inspector reports on the progress of individual teachers or schools, and board registers that comment on the progress of schools generally within a given sort of provincial or locality. So there's quite a lot of material. There's not just school registers. If you're interested in starting with pupil registers, then PRONI actually has an index to those you can download from your own home on the PRONI website. What's good about them? They give the parish that it's in, so the civil parish the school is in. So if you know your civil parish, you can start looking at schools in that vicinity. You can find the name of the school. It may also have an alias, and then the SCH for school is the reference number if you were to order out records relating to that school, the school registers, and they may be /1/2/3, they may be boys' school, they may be girls' school. And don't also let a school name put you off, where you may think, well, that school seems to be Catholic and my ancestor Presbyterian. Well, maybe that was the only school in the neighbourhood because it's a very rural neighbourhood. So all children could be educated together, because non-denominational education was the goal when the system was set up. So never ignore a source. You should always look at it. Most of these held in PRONI are still not digitised. You have to look at them online, or sorry, you have to look at them in person. School registers can be really useful because they can gear the date of entrance, the number of the child at the school, full name, their date of birth, their religion, or their age. Rather than date of birth, you may say their age on entry. The residence, which would be the village, the townland or street, the parent or the guardian's occupation, and the name and the county of last school attended. And that can be really useful. School registers only really date from the 1850s onwards. There's not too much before that, but they can be wonderful sources for helping identify the movement of families within the island of Ireland or within the British Isles, Ireland and Great Britain, because people move back and forward. Remember, we're in the industrial age now. And this is the sort of material that one might find, or you can see, if we look at the top, the date of entrance, their roll number, their name, age or date of birth, their religion, the residence, the occupation of their parent, probably father in most cases. And we can see here that this individual here is a chemist, and the last school attended for this pupil was in St Margaret's, Edinburgh. This here, school records are really useful because they also give an indication of what became of the pupil after they finished. And here we have noted that this pupil has gone to Rainey Endowed School in Machrafelt, so they've gone on to continue their studies. Really brilliant signposting records, the school registers. Also, they don't signpost in any one direction. Here we have, it's for the early 20th century, it's Glenshesque in County Antrim, but note here, the last school of the pupil, in this case, McMullins, Eileen and John, was in Fairmount, New Jersey. So they have been in America and they've returned to Northern Ireland, and they're being educated here in the late 1920s in Northern Ireland. We see more than one example of that. Now, when people think of the records, they think only of the school registers, but there is much more. The ED references are well worth consulting. And you can say like the grant aid applications or education office files or school inspector papers or salary books, as you can see if you look down that list. Don't ignore those. For example, for that earliest period when national education was introduced, when individuals in community were applying for a grant aid application, which may be for a new school, an additional schoolroom, teacher salary, another teacher salary, for materials for the school, just depends. They had to answer quite a number of questions, given the background, etc. And this form often appeared. It's phased out, but in the early decade, you see this in these forms. And the authorities, keen to see interdenominational education promoted, asked those individuals in the community supporting the application to list their name, sign their name, whether Protestant or Catholic. And you can see 10 Protestants and 9 Catholics have signed this. So this is far more likely to get funding from the National Board because they see that the community is working together to support the school. And you may often see the Catholic parish priest, the Presbyterian minister, the Church of Ireland rector, the first names on it. But that is where you could find the name of your ancestor. And bear that point in mind and say about rural communities, because remember, children had to walk to school. You may find that maybe a community is very strongly Catholic or strongly Presbyterian or strongly Church of Ireland. It's just the nature of things. But your ancestor might have been educated there. But these at least could throw some light on your, so that parent of the children who were going to school from around the 1830s, early 1840s. And what's more, these grant aid applications are now digitized in the main, and from the front-facing, the public-facing website, you can actually access. So you can see if you go into, say, any one of them there, the dates, it says this little entry or this little symbol here, view under digital record. If you click that, the document will download and you will get, in this case here, the school grant aid application for Garrison School in County Fermanagh. And I'll just finish also with this just now. Other things that you will find if you explore, you may have a teacher ancestor in the family, but they may have started life with the intention of becoming a teacher, but never did. So you can find under the ED records, ED/5, Register of Paid Monitors. These are helpers in the school, basically as a, if you like, an apprentice assisting the teacher before they might have done some formal studies for becoming a properly qualified teacher. And after 1838, there's a proper system of qualification for teachers. So in this case, we can see it's in Brasheen, County Antrim. The monitor was William White. And it gives his dates, his parents' religion, his parents' occupation, where he himself was educated at the same school. He leaves in 1857, so he did not have a career as a teacher, and he emigrated to Australia to be with his brothers there. And that comes back to that point again we would make time and time again, is that you make it, well, our ancestors weren't teachers. Well, probably, but they may have started with the intention of becoming a teacher and then decided to just throw it in and go off and do something else. So I will stop there, and if we come back on, Gillian and William come back online, we'll maybe go to Q&A, and just to get the ball rolling, William, that question that Ramsey put in about 18th century records, would you maybe deal with that first?
Okay, so yes, there are records for the 18th century. Gillian has outlined some church records already, so certainly the numbers of records do increase quite substantially in the 19th century, but there are still records that can be looked at for the 18th century. So church records, and keep in mind within the broader category of church records, you have minute books, which record the business of the parish. And these may exist even if the registers don't, the registers of baptisms, marriages, and burials. So keep an eye out for vestry minute books. There are also many records relating to the management of landed estates in Ulster. So most farmers did not own their land, they were tenants on an estate. And PRONI has a very extensive collection of estate papers, including leases and rentals and maps and surveys and some of the manor court records that I showed earlier. And there are miscellaneous other records. For example, there's the Flax Growers List of 1796, which contains some 55,000 names, 56,000 names, I think, arranged by civil parish and county. And it's a very good way of just seeing where a name might occur. Now, of course, the numbers of names by county varies quite a bit. So there are over 7,000 names for Donegal, for example, but there are only just over 1,000 names for County Antrim. That's not a true reflection of the relative populations of those counties. It's simply a reflection of which were the main flax growing areas in Ireland at that time. And certainly in the 19th century, no county grew more flax than County Donegal. So yes, there are certainly records, and my own book, Researching Scotch-Irish Ancestors, 1600 to 1800, does itemize records at parish level for all 300 plus parishes in the 9 counties of Ulster. And Gillian has just brought up a slide of the book itself. So, oh, and I see that it's on special offer at the moment as well. So you might want to avail of that while there is the opportunity.
I was just typing a reply there to Christy. Do we have any questions from the floor? Put your hand up if you haven't put it in the, or do that wave thing that Zoom does if you want to take the question. Now, bear in mind, this wasn't intended to be a genealogical presentation. It's to give you practical details about if you're coming, like hotels near PRONI or good places to stay, or if I'm coming in via London or Edinburgh or whatever, that sort of thing. But we'll take them as they come. So any queries?
Can I just mention a couple of things as well, Fintan, just practically about our conferences?
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. So one of the things we sometimes get asked is, is there a particular hotel, that we connect with for the conferences? And we don't do that because everyone's needs in terms of accommodation, in terms of what they require in their accommodation. Some people require maybe ability to cook for themselves with dietary needs. Some people, have different cost issues. So we will show you what PRONI is. There are a couple of hotels. Actually, maybe I'll show you just the map of PRONI. Let me see if I can just bring that up real quickly. Bear with me just a second. Come on, Google. So PRONI is actually, this is a map of Belfast. Most of Belfast is west of the River Lagan, which is County Antrim. And then a part of Belfast is in County Down, which is east of the River Lagan, you can see. So PRONI is actually on the east side. It is just here, right near the river. And there are 2 hotels that are really close to it, which is the Premier Inn, which is literally across the road. And then a few minutes walk, there is Titanic Hotel, which would be a little bit more upmarket than Premier Inn. Those are the 2 on that side. But there's a little footbridge that you can get across the Lagan. It would maybe be a 15-20 minute walk. And then there's a lot more hotels, obviously in Belfast city centre, which is west of the Lagan, particularly in what's called the Cathedral Quarter. So this is Belfast Cathedral and all the streets and roads around it. There are a lot of restaurants, bars and hotels and different residences. And obviously there's a range of Airbnbs and self-catering as well. So why we don't recommend a particular hotel, certainly if you were interested in coming on one of our conferences, you could contact us and ask us, is this within walking distance? Is this on public transport? There's a really great bus route between the city centre and over to PRONI called the Glida. So it's really easy to get around the city and very safe to get around the city, either in public transport or walking. So we can certainly help you decide where to book your accommodation, although we don't recommend, we don't have one hotel associated with our events. And the other thing I just wanted to mention, obviously, if you do come on our conferences, as part of the package, you send in the information about the people you're researching and your objectives for the conference, and then we provide you with a research assessment. It's sort of like a research plan. So we look at the information and we look at what church records are available, what other records are available for the time period you're interested in, for the geographical area you're interested in, and we give you some suggestions. And that's really helpful for you, particularly for that first day in the archives, that you actually have a list of sources for you to get going with, to start looking through as you settle into the archive. So I just wanted to highlight that with you. If you are able to join us on one of the conferences, that is a really helpful thing to kind of get you established. We may recommend some things for you to do yourself online if you have time before you come to the conference. I think that's... Oh, one other thing I would say about our conferences before I pass back to Fintan, and this is something I really love about them, is that you have the joy of spending your time with fellow genealogists. If you're anything like me, you maybe don't have a huge number of family members or friends who are just as into genealogy as you are. And what I love about our conferences is that our conferences include all the lunches, that they're included in the price, and several dinners as well. So you get to sit with fellow genealogists. Maybe you're talking to us with some advice, but actually maybe you're just talking to your fellow delegates for advice, for what were you looking at today? What finds have you discovered? And it means that whenever you make a breakthrough and you're delighted because you finally found this record of your ancestor, your great-great-great-grandfather, that everybody around you understands your excitement and understands your joy and will, support you and encourage you as well. So that's just one of the lovely things about our conferences, is being able to spend time with fellow genealogy geeks, as I describe myself, as well as many of you. Fintan, I'll pass over to
Yeah, okay. Just quickly before we wind up, if there's any last questions, but just one other point I want to make for anybody who's relatively new to research. Increasingly, certainly over the last 10 years, at our programs, we have met people who have not only never been in an Irish archive before, because of the availability of digital records, they're a keen researcher, but they've never been in any archive before. And so our team is aware of that. We began to notice that, as I say, quite a number of years ago. And we can cater to, if you're a complete novice, like all of us, if I landed in, I don't know, Toronto or Melbourne and went to use the local archive, I'd be completely distraught, I suppose, is a fair way to describe it, because getting used to an archive always takes time. But just bear that in mind if you're maybe thinking, well, I quite like the idea, but really I have no archival experience. That's what our team is there for. And there's nothing more we like to see is maybe somebody comes to our program, maybe comes a couple of times, and then one time we're in the record office and we see they're on their own. And it's like our little ducklings have all grown up and made their way because they've got the confidence. So if you're a complete newbie, don't think that this program isn't from you. Our staff are very careful to take the time with you at the level that you're at. Okay. Now, if you have any specific questions about travel accommodations, that we can certainly follow up with you, and you follow up. Well, some of it we can do by round robin, so we're not sending countless number of emails to the same or to different people. But others, if you have any specific queries, you can send them in, and we'll deal with them as best you can. If we any, I'm just checking these. Okay. Okay. So I don't think we have very complimentary comments, which is appreciated very much, but I don't think we have any more
There
queries.
was a question, Fintan, just a quick one about assize records for County Down about I think it was 1930 to 31. I did have a quick look at the PRONI catalogue, and it does look like, well, there are records, yes, but it also looks like those records are closed. So probably the best way to see what transpired at a court case is through a newspaper. Actually, if you go onto a database like the British Newspaper Archive, it has many Irish newspapers on it, including local newspapers in Ulster. So that might actually be a quicker way of finding out what was actually what actually happened at the court case and trying to find the records in PRONI. The records look like they're closed. You could potentially make a case to have access to them, but as I say, newspapers might be the quickest way to do that.
Okay.
And Fintan, just to finish off, are you going to just mention the deposit?
Well, you can now that you're here.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
So at the minute, folks, the deposit for our 2026 conferences is usually £350, but at the minute it is only £100 to put down a deposit on one of our conferences. And because you attended this webinar today, we actually have £25 off your booking for your conference. So the code is just returning 2026, capital R, returning 2026. If you have any issues with that code, just drop Conleth a line, who sent out the link. Yeah, and we'd be absolutely, we know we have a few returnees who have previously attended our conferences with us today, so thank you so much for dropping in. We hope you find that I hope you all found that the webinar helpful. We would absolutely love to see you in PRONI at some point in the future, either in 2026 or maybe 2027. I know one lady is thinking about that year. If you have any questions about the practicalities of PRONI or conferences, please do let us know.
Okay, right. Thank you very much, everybody. The recording will be made available for you to look at things again. Somebody asked about, getting particular records. We can't give away some of the records because they're not our property to give away, but we will make available what we can. But you will have the recording to review. And those of you who weren't able to join in person for the live event, we hope you found this of use. Thanks. Okay, bye-bye.
Super. Thanks all for joining us. Bye now.